guys, so today's video is going to be a little more serious than some of the other videos that I've been doing. This is a writing character video, and I'm doing it in a very different format than I had been doing them, mainly because I didn't like the format I was using. I was demonstrating what I was doing on a character development sheet. But I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to be doing it more like this, that I'm just going to have a topic and explain, that kind of thing. So, this time around, as you can tell by the title, is, kind of a weird one to start on, but it's something that's near and dear to my heart. It's, prevalent heavily in my book, and so I thought, with, all the books that are being released every day that may or may not abide by these guidelines, may or may not display these things well or poorly, but I decided that this would be a good video to release. So, of course, I am talking about writing mental health and or traumas in your story. Now, what I mean by, and the reason I put these two things together, is because a lot of the guidelines are very similar, and there wouldn't be a good reason to do two different videos. The rules are kind of the same. Obviously, the way it's displayed is very different. I'm just going to go through 4 points, and then little sub-points underneath explaining what to do, how to do it. Disclaimer, I will be talking about heavy material in this in example formats. I'm not going to get super graphic, but if you are sensitive to certain topics, you may not want to write about them or watch this video. So just keep in mind that if for whatever reason you can't watch through this video, that's okay. I totally understand. Don't feel like you have to. Put your own mental health in the first and foremost. So the first point I want to make is the question you have to ask yourself: is this necessary for my story? Does this have to happen? In my book, personally, I have a main character that is suffering with depression, self-harm addiction, and suicidal tendencies. And all those things are extremely heavy subjects, and I wouldn't have that as a focal point or an important thing if I did not feel like it was necessary for the story. There are several stories that I know are out there that just kind of added there, and it's merely just a plot device. Like, they'll have a character that becomes sexually abused by the villain to prove the villain is evil. Don't do that. You don't have to do that. You can display the villain as being evil in another way. You don't have to go in that direction. Or they'll have a character with anxiety, and it's just kind of their little quirk kind of thing, and those ways of doing it is not the proper way of handling those subjects. And another question you should ask yourself is, can you convey the story similarly without those subjects? For my story, I feel like I can't, because my story is meant as it's a social commentary and a dual lesson in explaining mental health to the reader. And obviously I can't do that if I don't have that in the story. But not all stories use it for that, and not all stories have it for that purpose. And so, and honestly, if you are considering adding a mental health issue or a traumatic experience, do not do it lightly. Do look through what you want your story to be and honestly think hard, does this need to be here? Another point, the second point I want to make is a reminder to you that you are not the expert. Even if you lived these situations firsthand, don't act as though your experience is the only way to experience it, because that is very untrue. As I said, my book deals heavily with, depression and the side effects of that. And obviously I know that not everyone that has one of these things has the others. But in this particular case, my main character does. And that's a thing to keep in mind, that not every person experiences the same situation the same way. I personally have had experience with all three of those things, and not in the same way as my main character. And that's important to keep in mind, that just because you lived X doesn't mean your character would live the same way. They have different personality. They have different experiences outside of that would shape and change how they react. There are two different ways of how to get how to figure out how other people experience things. The first way is to interview or know people, meet people that have lived those experiences, and talk to them about how their experience is. Now, that's not to say that you copy their experience or that you take them as a person and put them in your book. That is not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying to see what the real world is like, and just take in how other people experience things and see which way fits with your character. And the second way, if you don't know anybody that has dealt with this, or for whatever reason you don't feel comfortable interviewing people specifically, do a lot of research on the internet. There is a lot of sites that are dedicated to spreading awareness on these things and talking about various different subjects. So when in doubt, research, and but honestly the best way to get information would be to interview people that lived it firsthand. But in that, also research it. The next point I want to make, point number 3, which is kind of another self-reflective. You've realized your story needs this. You then have to realize how your story is going to display these topics. So, the first thing you have to keep in mind and ask yourself is this traumatic experience or this mental health issue a current problem in the story, or is it something that was in the past for a character and it's coming back as kind of a, like a suppressed memory, or a, something of that nature. Because those two things are very different in the way that you display that. Because if it's a current problem, depending on who your character is, they may or may not know how to handle it. Versus if it's in the past, it may be like, yes, I did suffer from this mental issue, but now I am better, or I am getting better, or something. And that's very different than being in the heat of the moment. So you have to figure out, where in the timeline of your characters does this issue fit in. The second thing to keep in mind and ask yourself is what triggers those feelings, emotions, or memories. Because with these topics and with these situations and issues, there is always something that will trigger those memories and those feelings and things. And every person is different. Every person is very different on what those things are. Like for myself, I have a thing that I don't like being around knives. Nothing, like other people can have them, I just personally don't want to touch them, use them. And that's just me. I am I know a lot of people that doesn't bother them, but for me, that's a thing that I just don't do. Um, and so, and there's like certain words that I don't like, and that's a thing to keep in mind too, that, you know, certain characters, if they have things in their past, they won't use certain words. Like if a character was emotionally manipulated or abused at some point in their life, or currently are, there be words that they will back off, and they won't, you know, that will shut them down or cause them to fight back, whichever response fits them as a character. So you have to keep in mind, you know, which character is dealing with these situations, or in what way these situations are being dealt. So you need to know what triggers and what's a natural trigger for these things. The third thing is, how graphic are you going to explain these situations? Is it going to be kind of like in passing? Is it going to be like subtle? Or is it going to be very explicit, very detailed? I've seen books do it both ways, and I've seen them do it well both ways and fail miserably both ways. So it's not like one way is a superior way, but it's very important to keep in mind that which way you want to go, because that will shape who can read it. Like if you have a book that might be more geared to a YA audience, but you have graphic depictions of sexual assault, you may not want that in young adult. You may want to put that in a new adult or an adult book because of the themes. And so you may want to keep that in mind, what audience you have, to explain how graphic you want it to be, and how graphic it needs to be to convey the message you need to be. And the last question, the last point on this story part is, who knows about the actions or event or mental health issue. So, and this is good to see. Is your main character dealing with it on their own? Like, are they dealing with depression, say, and they feel like nobody knows about it, so they don't have anybody to lean on? Or were they, abused as a child, and now everybody, they have a huge circle of people that know and understand and support them and help them through dealing with that trauma? Those two things would be very different. So you need to outline and think about what characters know what and how much they know. Because some characters may know every detail of this situation, and then other characters may just know vaguely what's going on and may or may never be completely filled in. And that's okay. That's, just figure out, gauge, again, how prevalent this is in your story, and figure out what and how you want other characters to understand and situate and react around that character. Because character reaction is very important to keep in mind as well. Because if your character, say your character was assaulted, okay? And they then have this significant other that's extremely physical. Say they don't know. That female in this example, the female character would just be very put off by that, generally, because that is something they know. And say they tell that significant other that this happened to them. If that male character or that love interest character is worth their salt at all as a love interest, they would then react differently. They would be more sensitive to that. Because, nobody likes that character, and I think everyone has been subjected to this at one point or another. A character that went through a trauma and then immediately goes and does something stupid that would go against that trauma. That's like, oh, for this one scene, for plot convenience, this doesn't affect me. That's stupid and annoying, and nobody likes it, so don't do it. And that leads to the last point, which is to handle the situation with care. These situations are not to be handled lightly, and not to be thrown in for plot convenience or, conflict or anything. It is meant to be handled seriously, because these are serious issues. Whether it be, depression, abuse, eating disorder, any of those things, they are all extremely serious and should not be handled lightly in a story or in real life. So, some more things to, keep in mind. Since it is such a big deal, don't have your characters just play it off as if it's not. Now, you can have a character that doesn't understand the immense weight of the issue. And that's okay, not everybody does. But as a writer, you have to show that that's not okay. And explain, even if that character never gets it, you can't let the readers finish the book and not get it. Another thing is, just please don't add it for don't add these things just for shock value. Because that's annoying. I feel like we've all read books, I know I have, in which you're reading and it's fine and it's great, and then all of a sudden, boom, somebody tries to kill themselves, and it's in graphic detail, and there's no warning, no setup, nothing. That's not okay. That is not okay for anybody, and that's just bad writing and handling the situation poorly and taking it lightly and literally just adding it for shock value. And that is not okay. So don't do that. People will not take well to that, and you will get in a lot of trouble with your readers for doing that. So just don't go there. If you're having a situation, lead into it. Don't just nail people with it for the intention of shock value. Have some way of hinting to it, or, if it's say your character has an eating disorder, have them show symptoms of that before they execute the actual actions that they display with that. The third thing to keep in mind is, again, don't have your characters do things that contradict that trauma or health issue. Don't have the character that was sexually assaulted then go and have sex with their boyfriend immediately after. That's not the way real world works. That's not the way a healthy relationship would work. That's not how anything works in the real world. Don't try to make your fictional world do stupid stuff like that. That is offensive to people that have dealt with that. It's offensive to people that know better and are like, we felt insulted in our intelligence. We know that's not how it works. And it's just frustrating and annoying. So, again, research how things work, figure out what triggers your characters, and don't have them do stupid stuff like that. The fourth point is to use trigger warnings if they're needed. So, this one is kind of a split decision. Some people believe highly in trigger warnings, some people are totally against them. This is my opinion on it. If you're having a book that has graphic, explicit descriptions of any form of trauma or health issue, I do believe that you should have some form of awareness in either like your synopsis or a trigger warning or some form of something before the person picks up the book and starts reading and gets invested and then gets hit with it. No matter how well you handle it, the reader may not handle it well. You need to prepare them in some way. Now, if you have it lightly, like it's just like very subtly mentioned, depending on your personal opinion on it and how prevalent it is, you may want to put like a little warning in like the opening, like the the acknowledgement type page in the very beginning and say, this book deals with X and Y. If you are sensitive to these issues, proceed with caution. That's what I do with my books, because I do have relatively graphic descriptions of these events. They are more played with the emotions, so it's not super visually graphic, but it's overwhelming emotions. And so I feel the most comfortable releasing it with a trigger warning saying these things are in the book. They are important in the book. You can't skim over them. They are the book. Which is very important to know when you give it to your beta readers and eventually your actual readers, just so they know what they're getting into. The next point is, this we've seen 100 times as well. Don't have them be saved by the male or female love interest. There are so many times that this gets played out that it's very annoying, because people can't be saved by other people from these kinds of things. You cannot be suffering from depression and then as soon as you find a guy, your depression goes away. That is not realistic, and that leads the readers to believe that that's how it works. And so if you give that book to someone who is suffering from depression and they read it, they will then believe that they need someone to save them from it, and that they can't do anything themselves to get out of it, that they need someone else to do it for them. And that's just as dangerous as just not doing anything, because if your character honestly believes that they need someone else to deal with their situation for them, if they believe that they need to be saved by someone else and that they can't do it themselves, you really you need to really evaluate your character, because they have more problems than just the issue. And I may make another video on just that premise alone, because it is a very prevalent thing we see in specifically YA books, and it's a very dangerous belief to have, that your life is in shambles and suddenly you fall in love and everything fixes itself. That's not how the real world works, and you will get yourself into trouble believing that. I know that. I have personal experience in that. It doesn't work. If you want something, if you want your book to be realistic, then you will want your character to figure out a way of dealing with this situation, taking initiative for dealing with their situation. That doesn't mean that they don't need other people. That's not to say that they need to just cut off all ties from people and that they can do it themselves. That's not what I meant. If they need to go into trauma counseling, do that. If they need to have a circle of friends that understand them, do that. If they have a love interest that wants to, help in some way, definitely have that. But don't have them be saved by other people, because recovery is done by the initiative for recovery is done by the person dealing with it, not by the people around them. And the last thing to keep in mind is to remember that mental health issues and traumatic effects can happen to any person, regardless of gender, of race, of sexuality. It can happen to anybody. So, we see this a lot in books, and a character that, a female character that deals with, these issues. We see some other issues that are handled, that men deal with, but it's kind of an unspoken situation if a man deals with an eating disorder or depression or things like that. And that's honestly, that's the way society is, and people don't realize this, but, you know, these things can affect anybody, and so your book can reflect that. Now, if you have a female character dealing with the situations, like my book does, there's nothing wrong with that. But later in my series, I do have a male character that deals with situations similar to my female protagonist in this book, to demonstrate the fact that it's not just female characters that deal with these situations. And so that's just something to keep in mind, that if you're trying to figure out that your book needs this, but you don't have a female character to have it, you know, to have this experiences happen to them, see if it would work with a male character. I mean, not everything will, you know, but again, just don't put it in for shock value. If you really can't figure it out and you just want it in there, but it doesn't work in there, don't put it in there. But it's just, you know, things to keep in mind. And so that's all I have for this week's video. I'm sorry it's kind of heavy. It was just kind of something that was very serious, and I just really wanted to talk about it. And yeah, so, if this is your first video, welcome, thank you for coming. Press subscribe. I upload on Saturdays and Wednesdays. And if you like this video, just press like. And if you have any comments, concerns, if you have any questions at all about any of the topics that I explained, and you need clarification, just go down in the comments, and, you know, I'm willing to talk to anybody about anything. And as always, I hope you all are having a great day, and I will see you all in the next video.